Okay, just make sure the stream comes up, and then we will start. Okay, looks good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sorry about my voice. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to the many students attending these satsangs online. We have a lot of great questions as always. And so as always, we'll alternate between online questions and questions from our local students here in New Jersey. We'll start, we'll start here. A question from Prashanto in Bangladesh. Nice to hear from Prashanto again. I am a family person, and leaving family and being a monk is somewhat out of the question. Not somewhat. But for you, I suppose it's not the case. Therefore, my question is as follows. How does it feel to be a lifelong sannyasi for you? Not exactly lifelong, so I think 1993, it's probably in my early 30s, I think, or something like that. Have you ever missed being in a typical family like us? The basic principle for sannyasa is if you want to be in a family, don't take sannyasa. If I wanted a family, then I would not have taken sannyasa in 1993. I think this is, for the vast majority of sannyasis, it's a matter of preferred lifestyle. So there are people who, commonly people prefer to have a conventional life and have a family. Wonderful. There are a few weirdos like me. Weirdo is perhaps not the right term. Let's say unusual ones, outliers. There's a nice term. There are a few outliers like me who are not inclined to live a conventional life, and I never was, even when I was younger, not inclined towards conventional life, and certainly not inclined towards having a family. So for such people, becoming a sannyasi is very natural. It fits well. Of course, that's not always the case. Have you ever bought clothing that didn't fit right? That happens in the same way for some people who take sannyasa, it doesn't fit right, in which case they've made some kind of mistake. Next question from Karthik in India. He says, oh, that's interesting. Where Karthik lives, he says in a temple, they play loud music in the temple every morning when he's trying to sleep. And if you approach the priests, the pundits at the temple, they become defensive. And they even talk rudely, the common issue in different places around India. I love India, but it's noisy, right? Compared to this country. Wherever you are, it's just noisy. Other things as well, but anyway. Karthik's question, is this considered bhakti? Well, here we have to understand that bhakti is different for every single person. There is no standard way of practicing bhakti. Devotion is personal, so it depends on every individual. For the priests who are overseeing the activities of the temple, they consider it to be their interpretation of bhakti is to draw attention to the temple and to bring people to worship at the temple. For the sake of doing so, they they broadcast this music. I'm not justifying it. It's noisy. I've heard it so many times, and my own sleep has been disturbed. By the way, when I travel to India, I bring earplugs. Good thing. So I use them. He concludes, because of this, I am unable to develop my bhakti practice, and my spiritual life is being affected because of my sleep. I just gave the solution. So, but in a broader sense, we had this discussion in yesterday's class, as a matter of fact, and that is, wouldn't it be good for us to encourage others who have religious inclinations different from ours? So Kartik's preference, and my preference too, would be that there wouldn't be loud music from, and not just the temples, the masjids also loud. You hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. You hear that call to prayer, and it can be noisy. It would certainly be my preference for that not to occur, but it serves a purpose for them. So if in the masjid, it's to call to prayer. People who live near the mosque, they know when they hear this sound coming, this chant coming, they know they should go for prayer. And similarly in the morning, when devotees hear the temple blaring its music, they know they should go for puja. It serves their purpose, even if it doesn't serve your purpose. So shouldn't we be a little more understanding and tolerant, is the point. We talked about that at some length before. Next question here from Arun, who lives in Bangalore. There's a belief in heaven and hell, Vaikuntha, Goloka, and other lokas. And there seems to be similar beliefs in different heavens and hells in the Abrahamic faiths, the Jewish tradition, Christianity, and Islam. This belief in heaven and hell is common amongst many religions, and even Tibetan Buddhism. Not all Buddhists, but Tibetan Buddhists also believe in many heavens and hells. So Arun asks, how should we understand this narrative? So common beliefs are hardly surprising, because suppose we look at these religious traditions and differentiate the contents. One is a content of unverifiable beliefs, but the other part, each religion has within it certain universal truths. So in order for my answer to make sense, consider this division. Every religious tradition is a combination of unverifiable beliefs plus universal truths. And we find commonality in both areas. Universal truths are universal. Therefore, what is true for Hindus should be true for Christians and Muslims and others. And these unverifiable beliefs are also in common, but they're in common for different reasons. Universal truths are by definition universal. No one creates truth. Newton did not invent the law of gravity. Before Newton lived, apples still fell down. So he didn't create gravity, he merely gave a mathematical formulation to it. So he revealed an already existent universal truth. But let's look at these religious beliefs. Where do these religious beliefs come from? There are many commonalities, there are also many differences, equal number of differences, maybe more differences, but they're not universal. They're culture specific. There are some commonalities, heaven and hell, But definitely what Hindus believe is very different from what Muslims believe, different from what Christians believe. So they're definitely not universal. Universal truths, universal. These non-verifiable beliefs come from scriptures. Where did the scriptures come from? Ultimately, even though the scriptures are revealed in all religious traditions, the revelations have a cultural basis. So the biblical revelations took place in the Middle East. We see a lot of similarities among them. The Vedas and Buddhist teachings had their revelation in South Asia, and so we see commonalities there. And then we see commonalities between them because we're all human beings. People born in the Middle East, human beings. In South Asia, human beings. In this country, human beings. We're all human beings. So what? I would be surprised if we didn't see any commonalities amongst these religious and spiritual traditions. So for two reasons: universal truths and unverifiable beliefs. Unverifiable beliefs that emerge in a human culture. Therefore, we should expect to see commonalities. Next question from Sajit, who lives in Dubai. What is the very purpose of having a karmic cycle in an infinite loop? Nirguna Brahman is real consciousness in a state of eternal bliss. If that's the case, why would simultaneously Saguna Brahman and the creative capacity of Maya and the whole cosmos be bound by the karmic cycle to coexist? Why? Sajid, you might not like my answer. And the answer has to do with a problem with the question. Why is a question about cause and effect? Why did this happen? Means, what was the cause because of which it happened, right? Why does the universe exist? Is basically Sajid's question. If the truth is non-dual Brahman, why does the universe exist? So we ask that question, why does the universe exist? Why means, what is the cause because of which the universe exists? And here's the problem. It's a logical problem. Let's see if you can get this. A little subtle. So cause-effect relationships are part of the universe. Within the universe, we can ask why. What are the causes? What are the effects? But what Sajid is doing is taking a standpoint outside of the universe, from the standpoint of Nirguna Brahman. And if you say from the standpoint of Nirguna Brahman, why did the universe exist? We have a problem. Because from the standpoint of Nirguna Brahman, there's no such thing as cause-effect relationships. So it turns out, I'm sorry, Sajid, but it turns out to be an invalid question. Why is this? And I was kind of making a joke before. I have to tell the whole joke, and that is, why? It sounds like a 2-year-old. Not that Sajid is not a 2-year-old, obviously, but children like to get, why? But why, Mom? Mom says 2 cookies is enough. And try the why. It's time for your nap. Why? So there's a natural inclination. We all want to know why. But for this question, from the standpoint of Nirguna Brahman, there are no such things as cause-effect relationships. Therefore, to ask why is an invalid question from the standpoint of Nirguna Brahman. From the standpoint of Saguna Brahman, from the standpoint of the manifest universe, absolutely valid. Why does the universe exist? One-word answer: karma. This universe exists because of karmas left over from the prior universe. Why did the prior universe exist? Because of karmas left over from the prior universe, etc., etc. So that string, that series, can be truly infinite, an unbeginning string of universes, an infinite series of universes. So Sajjad, I'm sorry that answer may not be very satisfying. Okay. This message has no content. I think there's a problem with my computer. As I read it before, it had content. I don't know where the content. One more question here from Jay in New York. Jay asks, does the mind depend on consciousness to function properly? I'll restate it. Can the mind function in the absence of consciousness? He says, for example, I can observe a thought in my mind and take an action in response to that thought. This tells me that I need consciousness to illumine my mind in order to respond appropriately to its contents. Absolutely correct thinking from Jay. And that is, mind exists because of consciousness. And here's some this could be a huge topic, very simple analysis I'll share with you to answer Jay's question. The analysis goes like this. What is mind? In a very simple way, mind is thought activities. Vrittis is a very simple, oversimplified, but for our sake right now, a little helpful. So if mind is thoughts, mind is vrittis, activities, then what are vrittis? And some of you know from our prior Vedanta class, every mental activity has two components. One component is consciousness. The other component is some kind of nama-rupa, some kind of form or function determined by the mind. So you have a conscious element, comes from you, your essential nature as Satchidananda Atma, and then you have this mental component, which gives form and individuality to that thought. So, if you take away consciousness, there's no such thing as thoughts, as mental activities. There's no such thing as mind. Okay, so good. Jay answered his own question quite correctly. Okay, we'll take some questions now. You can raise your hand, take the microphone.
In more recent times, I've been seeing a lot more homeless people, and sometimes I feel like it's my dharma to give as much as I can. But then a lot of times people say they're going to be spending it on drugs and other such things, and so what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, that's a good question. So, how to help? Say a beggar on the street. By the way, this is extremely common in India, and it's extremely problematic in India as it is in this country. In this country, you correctly said that some of them will actually take that money and buy their drug of choice, which could be crack cocaine, could be alcohol, could be whatever, or they may take that money and buy food. Both are possible. In the same way, when you see the street beggar in India, they could be legitimate, but you also know there are so many scams that go on. And by the way, in this country also, they have their scams. So some people, they actually form groups, and they have a certain plan of raising money, and they do so by posing as beggars and whatever. So anyway, how to discern the difference, we may not know. And and by the way, I'm not. We won't spend much time on this. It's not exactly Vedantic question, but a good solution to that problem, at least in this country, maybe less so in India. If the person wants money for food, take him to a restaurant and pay the bill. That's many people have suggested that, that way you're sure that the money is going in a good way. And then beyond that, it's use your instinct. Is this person legitimate or not? You might be wrong, but wouldn't it be better to err on the side of helping rather than on the side of not helping? Anyway, just some observations. Do we have other questions from our local audience? In back here.
Swamiji, my question is about attachments. As we progress through our spiritual path, we cannot remove our attachments, but are there different levels of attachment? Do we kind of weaken our attachments? If so, how do we do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. So, I don't know why that microphone is making so much noise. So there is definitely a huge problem with attachment. By the way, what does attachment mean? We use this word, attachment, all the time. And it's a good word to mean, but what does it, it's a little bit unclear in its meaning. So suppose we give it a better definition. Emotional dependence. That's a really good meaning. So attachment means emotional dependence. And absolutely, there are degrees of attachment, there are degrees of emotional dependence. And emotional dependence doesn't just mean on a person, it could mean an activity that gives you comfort. Or food, everyone has a comfort food. So we become attached to these sources of comfort. The source of comfort could be food, could be some activity, could be a person. It could be so many things. And we have a judgment that my well-being depends on this source of comfort. That's what we mean by emotional dependence, right? My well-being depends on him, her, it, whatever it is. And that makes us vulnerable, to use the word we used earlier, vulnerable because whatever you're dependent on is not always available. So when it's available, you're fine. When it's not available, you can become insecure, you can suffer a lot. What is the solution to the problem? The short-term solution is to become more resilient. And resilient in the sense of emotionally strong, emotionally healthy, so that you can better cope when your source of comfort is not available, so that you have a little bit of inner strength, stability, that you can cope more gracefully with the absence of that. But that's never a complete solution, it's a partial solution. The ultimate solution is found in the teachings of Vedanta, to understand that your true nature as Satchidananda Atma is innately comfortable. How's that for a word? I don't think I've used that word before. You don't need to do anything for the sake of Atma's comfort. Atma, by nature, is comfortable. You don't have to do anything. And the way you can establish, just so you know that this is not some kind of doctrine or dogma or some kind of idea. Tell me, when your mind is quiet, what do you have to do to be comfortable? Isn't that interesting? When your mind is quiet, what do you have to do to become comfortable? You're already comfortable. This is Atma's innate nature, is comfort. So, you mentioned degrees, put it like this. To the extent that you fail to recognize that your true nature is innately comfortable, I suppose I should say, to that extent that you don't recognize it, you will necessarily be dependent on so many external sources of comfort. But to the extent that you know that your comfort doesn't depend on anything external at all, to that extent you will no longer be emotionally dependent on external things. This is such an important teaching of Vedanta, because one of the main sources of suffering is attachment, emotional dependence. Think about in your own life, how many things do you depend on to be comfortable? And this creates, just to share with you a funny image I've used to describe this before. You want this perfect comfort, and this perfect comfort depends on several factors simultaneously being met, right? So your comfort depends on, you have to be healthy, you have to be not hungry or thirsty, it can't be too warm or too cold, and your loved one has to be available, and this and that and the other. Notice that if any one of these factors is missing, are you comfortable? No. So you have to simultaneously meet many different factors, which is tricky. To get them all present in the same time, to get them all lined up. And I've given a metaphor. So if there are 5 factors, imagine you have 5 kittens and you want to line them up. You have 1 down and then 2 and then 3, and then by the time you're reaching for 4, this one's wandered off, and then 5 and they both wander off. When will you get all 5 kittens to line up nicely for you? To me, that's what we're trying to do in life. Our contentment depends on the simultaneous presence of so many external sources of comfort. And to get all of that lined up exactly right is not easy. And that's the source of so much struggle and suffering in life. Okay, let's take some more questions here. Next question from Amar. Amar doesn't say where he's from, maybe India. Self-realized or enlightened person is not affected by cosmic dissolution, which means if you're enlightened, whether or not the universe exists or not, whether it's manifest or in a state of dissolution, doesn't make any difference. You remain non-separate from Brahman. If someone becomes aware of their true nature, as Satchidananda, after the death of their present body, will they continue to exist in an unmanifest way till eternity without being affected by the repetition of the cosmic dissolution? Amar is from Uttar Pradesh in India. There's so many it's very difficult for many people, including Amar, to understand what it's like to be enlightened after the loss of the body. To be enlightened now, while you're alive, I can describe in very few words. And to say to be enlightened is to be utterly free from suffering. What a simple and direct definition. What does it mean to be enlightened while you're alive? To be a jivan mukta. It means to be utterly free from suffering. Notice, to be free from suffering is not the same as being free from pain. It's possible to have physical pain without suffering. It's possible to have emotional pain without suffering. physical and emotional pain are part of the human condition. Suffering can be overcome. That's not our topic here, so I won't dwell on it further. So that is to be enlightened while you're alive, to be a jivan mukta. Then, at the time of death, the body goes away, which means no problem with physical pain. Mind also is not manifest. No problem with emotional pain. So therefore, no suffering. No suffering until and unless you get reborn, which is why so many scriptures describe in the condition of enlightenment, your connection to past karmas is destroyed, which means past karmas lose their capacity to cause another birth for you, which surprisingly is a good thing. And we have to address this in just a moment. If you do get reborn, will you be subject to pain? Physical pain? Yep. Will you be subject to emotional pain? Yes. Will you be born enlightened so that you don't suffer as a result of that physical and emotional pain? Well, ordinary people were born ignorant, were not born enlightenment. So another birth is considered more suffering, which is why the condition known as videha mukti, liberation or enlightenment after the fall of the body, is considered to be a condition in which there is no rebirth. Then here there's, in fact, we had one question last week, and it's a common question, and that is, how, if I don't have a body or mind, how do I enjoy the state of enlightenment? This common question. How can that be mukti? How can that be liberation if you can't enjoy it? If you can't... That's any kind of blissful experience is an experience, is limited, is transient, and we have to understand that enlightenment is not an experience, because every experience is limited. Every experience has a beginning and end. No matter how blissful the experience is, that experience has a beginning and an end. Enlightenment is not an experience. We've had this discussion here several times before. But then to answer the question about after death, what do you experience when you're dead? The answer really is nothing. Then, if I don't experience anything, then what? A lot of people get stuck with this. And some people are even afraid of it, which is a problem, by the way. In fact, it was, I think, in response to a question last week. The answer is found in your own experience. In dreamless sleep, what do you experience? Nothing. So is it a state of emptiness, nothingness, a void? You fall into this void of nothingness. You are nothing. There is nothing. Nothing but void, nothing but emptiness. Yeah. And I'm using this language to give a very negative feeling. Do you feel anything negative about deep sleep? Not at all. We all love dreamless sleep. What will it feel like to be dead? Not bad. In fact, think about it. For people who are suffering at the end of their lives, death is a tremendous relief. In some cases, some people just suffer. There's so much pain in the body, pain that can't be managed, or maybe emotional pain, I don't know. It's, for some people, dying is not easy. And people who die a quick death, in fact, are blessed in a manner of speaking. They don't suffer. But those who have a very extended period of dying, that act of dying, the suffering involved, it can be really, really bad. Which is why doctors who administer morphine, in my opinion, absolutely the right thing to do, to ease that person's transition from this life to death. Morphine is a excellent way to handle it. I keep making this point because many of our viewers are in India, and apparently this is not common in India. And somehow that bothers me. It should, it's such a wonderful treatment for end of life. It's used by every hospice in this country. It's used in every hospital in this country. It's recognized by every major medical institution as being helpful at the time of death. And it just seems like too many people, especially in India, suffer unnecessarily at the end of their lives because of the medical institution's reluctance to administer morphine, an addictive drug, etc., etc. Anyway, it's kind of something that sticks in my mind. But good news, as I said, is how will you feel when you're dead? Not bad. I think that's great. We love deep sleep. And how many times do you wake up wishing that you had slept more? If you have a question, you'll need to use the microphone.
I'm sorry I spoke up in between. Just jokingly, we were saying that we enjoy deep sleep, but we enjoy deep sleep when we wake up, right? That is the fear, like I think people have of death.
When deep sleep, are you afraid of not waking up?
No.
Oh, there's your answer. Seriously, that's the answer, because when you're dead, will you have any fear? None. None. There's nothing negative you can say about that condition. In fact, negative is if you wake up, suppose you wake up with a splitting headache. Suppose you wake up to a body that's got all kinds of problems. Suppose you die and wake up into an even worse life than you had the last time. So these are all problems we face. Okay, we have another question here, please.
Swamiji, then in that case, the suicide is considered bad. So how I connect this?
Okay. Suicide, we're not talking at all about suicide.
No, I mean,
so nothing we have said here justifies suicide. Nothing we've said here. We're talking about natural death. So to take your own life is a dharma, because you are causing himsa. You are killing this body. You don't have a dharmic right to cause harm to your own body. There are some rare situations in which a person is about to die and in extraordinary pain. For such a person to request a lethal dose of morphine could be called suicide, but under those unusual circumstances, it would not be considered a dharmic. And the circumstances were twofold. One is they're on the precipice of death. And second, is there an incredible pain? So in unusual circumstances, some kind of self-administered way of dying could be justifiable, but in general, no.
No, the reason I asked is because of this introduction of this thought that death is not so bad, or it is means in deep sleep you don't feel anything bad, might give the idea for unstable mind.
And what can we do for unstable minds? For a person who understands these teachings, you understand that if you take your life, means, first of all, that's to me evidence that you're not enlightened. And then, not being enlightened, you've bought yourself a ticket to the next life, which will have more suffering. In fact, because you took your own life, which is papa karma, that papa karma is going to cause even more suffering in the future. So if you say, what about for someone who's mentally unstable? We have no way of dealing with that. Some people suffer from different mental illnesses, and it's possible. Another question here. You'll need the microphone.
Thank you, Swamiji. My question is, if we, because I'm not really understanding, Atman is changeless. And if we come back due to karma and we begin to correct ourselves and this physical body dies away and we come back, what part of the self is evolving then? If Atma...
Atma doesn't evolve. Atma doesn't suffer. Atma doesn't have any problems. Let me try to answer the questions. There's common misunderstanding. First of all, evolution itself is a problem. Atma doesn't evolve. Even the transmigrating soul doesn't necessarily evolve. So this idea of evolution is a little foreign to the ancient rishis, so it wasn't really something they taught, more of a modern concept. So what we do understand is that Atma is unchanging, but the mind is full of problems. That mind needs a process of growth culminating in enlightenment to remove all the suffering in life. And when that enlightenment takes place, what happens to Atma? Nothing. And when the body dies, what happens to Atma? Nothing. So in that sense, for Atma, there's no evolution because there's no change. We talk about the mind going through a process of growth, emotional growth, spiritual growth, and hopefully culminating in enlightenment. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. Let's take a couple more questions here. Where are we? We are here. Chetan. Chetan lives in the UK. Welcome, Chetan. He's attending the classes on Upadesha Sahasri. Question with regard to conscious and unconscious mind. Because I am conscious, I experience the world through my mind, correct? If I hit my head or the doctors put me under anesthetic, put me in deep sleep, my mind is unconscious, as a doctor would say. And actually, a doctor won't say your mind is unconscious. Doctor will say the patient is unconscious. Is there a difference between the consciousness you're talking about and the unconsciousness the doctor is talking about? Absolutely. This is a huge difference. When medical professionals use the term conscious and unconscious, they're using it in a completely different sense than we use, which is why in almost every class I try my best to include a definition of consciousness. And our definition of consciousness is that because of which the activities of your mind is known. That's a great definition. Very precise, very short to the point. Consciousness is that because of which mental activities are known to you. And Kartik Chetan correctly said that the outside world is also known to you through your mind. Because you have a mind, you know what's happening in the world, you also know what's happening in your mind. All of this is known because of consciousness. From a Vedantic standpoint, do you ever become unconscious? Let's just explore this for a moment. This work now. At night in deep sleep, are you conscious? We've discussed this many times, but it's such an important topic. Many people say, how can I be conscious in deep sleep? I don't experience anything. There's no necessity to jump to that conclusion that consciousness turns off, like turning a switch on and off. Consciousness, there's no light switch. In fact, it would be nice if there were. Because sometimes when your mind is racing or if you feel really bad, wouldn't it be nice? Flick that switch and turn off all those uncomfortable thoughts. There's no such switch. So, what does it mean then in deep sleep? Are you truly unconscious, or there's another interpretation? You are fully conscious, but there's nothing to be conscious of. If you think about your experience of deep sleep, both are possible, logically speaking. In deep sleep, either your consciousness has blinked off, or your consciousness is fully on, but there's nothing to be seen, nothing to be observed, nothing to be experienced. Which of these two possibilities is more likely? Well, according to scriptures, consciousness is unchanging, so that's, if we're keeping tally, we'll have one check for unchanging consciousness and no checks for consciousness blinking off. And then here's an argument based on your own experience. If you are in a perfectly dark room with your eyes wide open, what do you see? Nothing. Do you still have the power of sight? In that dark room, you have the power of sight. And just a quick mind experiment right now. Suppose everything suddenly went black, perfectly pitch black for all of us simultaneously. How to explain that? One explanation could be that all of us simultaneously lost our power of sight. How's that? Huh? How is that even remote? And statistically, someone could, in your lifetime, you probably have a 1 in a million chance of going blind. Suppose we all go blind simultaneously. There's a statistical possibility. But it is so amazingly unlikely. And then, of course, if the lights come back on, then we all have our power of sight restored simultaneously. It is logically possible, but realistically speaking, it's fiction. What's far more likely is that in the absence of light, we all continue to be endowed with the power of sight, but there's nothing we can see. And this is a powerful metaphor to describe your experience in deep sleep. You are as conscious in deep sleep as you are right now. But there is nothing to be observed. Your capacity for awareness doesn't turn on and off. I said, as a counterexample, your faculty of awareness is not like the light bulb in your refrigerator. That one may turn off when you close the door. By the way, how do you know? Are you sure? Okay. We didn't finish Chaitan's question. So the medical usage of the term, from a standpoint of Vedanta, there's no such thing as unconscious. Consciousness is unchanging. There's always someone home, so to speak. Then why do doctors talk about unconscious? They actually have a number of levels. They don't just have consciousness and unconsciousness, but they have charts that determine a level of consciousness. I don't know if it's 5 stages or however many stages they have. And of course, what their definition of consciousness is how much does the patient respond to stimuli? That's the medical definition. Consciousness is the patient's response to stimuli. So right now, we would be judged as fully conscious, but a patient who, if you talk to them and they go, so some response. If you talk to the patient and they don't respond at all, but then they still have some reflexes, then that's another level. And if there's no reflex even, then that's yet another level. So they have different levels, but it's not levels of consciousness as we would understand. They're levels of a patient's response to stimuli, was the term that medical doctors would use. This question is from Atul. Atul lives in California. Long question. Let me start here. In a recent class, we talked about both randomness and free will both exist. There is such a thing as randomness. There is such a thing as free will. The world is not predestined. Whatever happens in the world is not predestined because free will is a fact of our experience. We all experience ourselves as being endowed with free will. On the other hand, we cannot say that everything in the world is random. Your behavior and my behavior is not random. The motion of planets around the sun is not random, but there is randomness also in the world. So just to point out that we like to oversimplify things. Is it this or that? Life is more complicated than that. Don't try to oversimplify it. Tell me which it is. Is the world random or is the world deterministic? It's more complicated than that. Okay, so if that's so, logically we have to have them both because you can't have one. You can't have one without the other. As a actually, I think this is the point. Apparently, Atul is the, where's his statement here? He is a victim of an automobile, some kind of accident, a debilitating accident. Doesn't say if it was automobile, but a very severe accident. And he has debilitating repercussions that are likely to continue until the end of his life. So imagine yourself, maybe in an automobile accident, not of your fault. That's what he says. But because of this accident, maybe you've lost your ability to walk, for example. And Atul goes on to say, is there no way for me to come to terms on whether or not it was random or the result of bad karma from past life? Please provide guidance. I know such thing. This is interesting. He admits, I know such thinking is distracting me from the main goal of Advaita Vedanta. Wow. But I am, maybe wrongly so, but I'm curious. So imagine, you've had a bad automobile accident, you've lost your ability to walk, and you have this question, was this a random event or was it due to bad karma? Or there are other options also. Need not be random, need not be Atul's bad karma. It could be the other driver's deliberate harmful action. There's yet another possibility, free will. Suppose the other driver used his or her free will to drink a lot of alcohol and then get in the car. Drinking alcohol is an accident or deliberate? Okay. So using free will, getting deliberately drunk, and then getting in the car, and then causing someone else, so it could also be, my guru would use the term abuse of free will, is another way to describe this situation. So now I'm making it even worse for Atul, making the situation more complex. Which is it? I lost my power of walking? Was it due to a random event? Is it due to my own bad karma from past lives? Is it due to the abuse of someone's free will? Which is it? And Atul wisely admits, I know such thinking is distracting me from the principal goal of Advaita Vedanta. There's a lot of wisdom in that. And the reason there's a lot of wisdom in that is there is no way of answering Atul's question. We can't figure it out. But really speaking, what difference does it make? Think about it. If you lost your ability to walk due to a random event, if you lost your ability to walk due to someone's abuse of free will, if you lost your ability to walk due to bad karma, what difference? You still can't walk. And it was a situation that you didn't choose. That's a fact in any of the three situations. You didn't choose the situation, and there's no way of determining which it is. So Atul correctly said, to get hung up in this question is a distraction. So sometimes we just need, not easy, we need to learn to let go. Let me end with a few comments here and then we'll wrap up our satsang today. Many people make themselves, I'm not saying this is true of Atul, but many people suffer more because of their response to a bad situation. And one of the most common examples, and I said this is probably not Atul, but many people say, why me? If it was a random event, why me? If it's bad karma, why me? If it's somebody else's abuse of free will, why me? The problem here is that such questions make you suffer more. Already, Atul certainly is already suffering the consequences of this severe accident. So to add to that suffering with a response that is unhelpful, we're making a bad situation worse. wouldn't it be better to admit, I don't know why it happened, so let me make the best out of the situation. Instead of being focused on the problem, you become focused on the solution. But that requires letting go. There's something in that why me. Lurking behind the scenes, so to speak, is blame. We all want to assign blame for our suffering. Whose fault is it? Is it the fault of nature? Is Ishvara causing me to suffer? Is this person causing me to suffer? Or is my suffering just random and inexplicable? We want to assign blame. And that is one of the most unhelpful perspectives we can have. It's the American expression, it's a done deal. Whatever it is, it's happened, it's over. To the extent that you continue to struggle with it, to try to understand what happened and who's at fault, doesn't that make you hold on to the problem? And the more you hold on to the problem, don't you suffer more? So we need to learn how to let go. By the way, prayer and meditation are wonderful aids to letting go. We can just more gracefully accept the things in life that we don't understand, the things that we can't control. And by letting go then, instead of turning our attention to what's wrong, we can turn our attention to what's right, what's good in our lives, and how we can make our lives even better. Meditation and prayer can help a lot. And I pray that whatever disability Otola is struggling with, I hope you have some, I hope it gets better. Okay, I think this will be a good time to wrap up our satsang. We'll continue next week. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om. That's it. See you next time.